It's Friday, July 16th, and it's time for your Barbados Today morning news update. Medical professionals are currently analyzing data from the latest COVID-19 statistics that will determine whether Barbados is currently experiencing a third wave of the virus. Barbados Today understands that the findings of this probe will also determine the next steps to be taken amid the spike in cases. When contacted, President of the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, Dr. Linda Williams, said she was not in a position to provide the details of the information that would guide the government's policy going forward. She, however, confirmed high-level talks among public health officials, academics, and the wider medical fraternity about the steady increase of cases.
That entails looking at all the indicators within country, cumulative numbers of cases. We are not how many people we think are infected by a single person. It has to do with, whether or not we think there are variants in the space. It has to do with many, many variables, or our ability to cope, our capacity for coping as a country with increased numbers, our capacity for contact tracing, it has to do with our positivity rates, it has to do with so many different factors. And then what we do, we call it building a model, right? So we build a model that projects how many cases we expect if we did nothing different. If we did just what we're doing now, if we did a little bit more, those are the kind of things that happen and that are happening now. And until those are done, we would not be able to speak to whether or not, we're in it, or we're going into it, or we're coming out of it.
Regional governments will now only contribute 50% of the University of the West Indies operational costs. However, Vice-Chancellor Professor Sir Hilary Beckles has assured that there is no intention to increase tuition fees as the university moves to generate more of the revenue it needs to maintain its operations. Addressing a virtual press conference on Thursday, Sir Hilary said that the days of governments being responsible for 80% of operational costs were at an end. He said that the change was part of plans to transform the UWI into a hybrid university with greater financial efficiency over the course of the next 5 years.
We have now decided to shift from a tradition decades old of deficit financing into a balanced budget approach. That we will now seek to have the governments and the University Council approve our budgets, and we will function within the parameters of those budgets. And so long as our investors, our governments especially, remain true to the budgets, that what they approve is what they invest, then we are going to be addressing the systemic deficit within our system in that way. The second fundamental decision we took was that we are going to be developing an entrepreneurial dimension to the university, a very aggressive commercial dimension to our university, self-financing approaches to our university. Now, the reason why this is important is because, on the one hand, we are a public university. We are a public developmental instrument of the people of the Caribbean. We are not driven by the profit motive. We are not a business enterprise, but we must be managed and we must conduct our affairs in a business-like fashion.
Sir Hilary again maintained that there were no plans to raise tuition fees, but admitted that the university would review the pricing of programs offered.
At the moment, our students are required to pay 20% of the costs of their academic programs. The model we are using is an 80-20 model. The governments are required to pay 80% of the costs to educate the citizens at the UWI. And so the students pay 20%. That 20% is called the tuition fee. The tuition fees of the universities at the moment amounts to about 15% of the university's overall cash income. So at the moment, the students, through paying their fees, contribute about 15% of the university's overall cash requirements. We do not intend to pursue a policy of increasing fees within the context of this pandemic and the challenges. However, what we do have to do is to look at how we price individual programs, how we price programs across faculties.
In other news, this Friday, the Cuban Barbadian Friendship Association is calling on CARICOM to turn up the pressure on the U.S. government to end the near 60-year trade embargo against Havana. The appeal by the president of the association, David Denny, comes on the heels of protest action in several cities across Cuba over the past several days.
We would like to CARICOM to repeat its call for the removal of the political embargo against Cuba. We would also like CARICOM governments to call on the Biden administration to remove the political embargo against a sister Caribbean nation, because the embargo against Cuba is an embargo against the Caribbean region, because many of our countries benefit from Cuba in the form of scholarships, eye care, medical care, and also dealing now with the COVID-19 situation. And we are all looking and we are ready to accept the Cuban vaccine within our region.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
The news from the region now. Persons vaccinated against COVID-19 and are visiting or returning to St. Vincent and the Grenadines will no longer be allowed to quarantine at home. Word of this from Prime Minister Dr. Rav Gonsalves as health officials prepare to implement new COVID-19 protocols in the country.
And a big change is that we've started already. This idea of allowing people to go into quarantine at home, we're going to discontinue that for a while, even though you're vaccinated, because if you're vaccinated, you most countries you come from, you just be doing 2 days quarantine in the hotel. If you come from a very highly a very high risk country, you'd have to quarantine even with a vaccine for up to 7 days or more. And the very high risk countries would be Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, Ecuador, South Africa, Suriname, Colombia, Belize, Guyana, Panama, India, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, the names would be there. We were allowing people to go to their homes. If everybody is vaccinated, or to go to a house where nobody else lives. But you're supposed to do that and give the information to the Health Services Subcommittee of NEMO 2 weeks before. But people just turning up. And they're creating a lot of problems.
And finally, on the international front, at least 80 people have reportedly died and hundreds more are missing in Germany following extreme flooding. Belgium has also reported at least 11 dead due to the extreme weather, with German Chancellor Angela Merkel pledging full support for the victims. Reports say record rainfall in Western Europe caused the rivers to burst their banks, devastating the region.
Dozens of people have died and dozens more reported missing as heavy rain and flooding inundated Western Europe. Rivers burst their banks, sweeping away cars and bringing down trees, as well as half a dozen houses. Police said at least 18 people had died and 70 were missing in the German wine-growing hub of Ahrweiler after the River Ahr burst its banks. Hundreds of soldiers were helping with the rescue efforts, using tanks to clear roads of landslides and fallen trees, while helicopters winched those stranded on rooftops to safety. The floods have caused Germany's worst mass loss of life in years. Armin Laschet, Premier of the hard-hit state of North Rhine-Westphalia and possible future Chancellor, blamed the extreme weather on global warming during a visit to the area. Torrential rain and flooding also hit other parts of Western Europe. In Belgium, around 10 houses collapsed in Pipinster, and residents were evacuated from more than 1,000 homes.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.